Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to our consultant training today. Today we're going to be talking about interaction and guidance. And this is part of our Avoiding Common Complaints series. So we want our classes to be as interactive as possible. And if a student is having a little bit of problems, we need to be sure to guide them. Now, when we're talking about interaction and guidance, there are some scenarios that may be more difficult than others, depending on the student, depending on the material. So we'll talk about that a little bit, how to involve students in different scenarios. So let's get started. Let's see what our training will involve. So we're going to first talk about some problems that would result in a lack of interaction. So why doesn't a student respond? And this isn't because of us, because we're not teaching correctly. It's something on the student side that's preventing them from speaking up and interacting with you. Then we'll talk about students' particular learning purposes. In other words, why are they here in class with us? Why are they learning? What is motivating them to be here? And then we're going to have a bit of a case study. We'll have three different kinds of students. Taro and Chris are motivated students. So we'll see how to interact with them. And then we'll learn how to interact with Jenny. Jenny is unmotivated to be there, so we need to guide her and help her a little bit more. So let's start with problems that result in a lack of interaction. Now, interaction in the classroom is very important. After all, that's why the students are taking classes with us. They could just read from a book. They could learn English from a textbook, but that has zero interaction in it. And interaction, especially when it comes to learning a language, really helps a student to develop those language skills, as well as social skills. We've got young students in our class, so they need to develop social skills as well. So it's very important. And it's part of the teacher's role because interaction rarely happens spontaneously. It doesn't happen on its own. Usually the teacher has to think about how to interact in the classroom ahead of time so she can set up a scenario where interaction flows easily and the students feel secure. They know what they're doing because the teacher knows what she's doing and she's planned it out and explained it well. But there are some things that can prevent interaction from happening. And like I mentioned earlier, this may not be your fault. You may have planned the interaction in a way that's simple and it's according to the level and the material, but something's stopping the student from interacting with you. Now, it could be different learning purposes, and we're going to take a look at that on the next slide. We'll go into more detail. So that might be the reason the student's there. The student might be really self-conscious, and I do find this is a common problem, especially with Asian students. They're afraid of making mistakes, and maybe if they feel like their English isn't good enough or they're a little bit overwhelmed with the lesson, they'd rather say nothing than speak up and make a mistake. So they might feel a little bit embarrassed in the class or just having low self-esteem, feeling like they're not good enough to try. And then another problem might just be that the student doesn't have sufficient language to participate. Maybe they don't understand the activity. Maybe they just don't know enough words to do the activity. Maybe they're at a really low level. And really low level students, we're going to have different types of interaction, but maybe not something like a role play. There's other ways that we can interact with students that maybe aren't up to the level they should be at, or just a low-level student, no role plays, maybe not interacting with other students, but we can still get them to participate. And we'll look into that a little bit later in the lesson. All right, so let's talk about different learning purposes. So here are our three students. We have Taro. She feels that English is an important subject. I need to pass English exams for further education. So she values English, but more on an educational level. She wants to pass her English exams. And then we have Chris. He says we're going on holiday to New York in September. So he needs to learn English to be able to survive when he goes to an English-speaking city and country. So both Taro and Chris are motivated. They're learning for a particular purpose and a particular reason, whether it's to get a good job and a good education, or to be able to communicate when they're traveling. And these sorts of students expect a lot of interaction. They want to be challenged. They want to learn as much as they possibly can. They want to apply the English in different scenarios so that they're prepared for their exams or when they go on the trip. But then we have a different type of student. This is Jenny. Jenny says, I'm not good at English at school. My mom forces me to learn. So Jenny is not self-motivated. She's there because she has to be, because her mom is forcing her to. And it looks like she doesn't have good grades in English at school. So already she's got a bit of low self-esteem with her bad English mark, and to make it worse, her mom's forcing her to have English classes and probably some extra tutoring to help improve those grades. But usually, if we're not good at something, we usually don't like it. So Jenny looks like she hates these lessons. She's crying. And it's a bit of a mixture of something that she doesn't like to do and a mixture of not feeling good about herself and not feeling good about her abilities. And she feels like she can't do it. So she has definitely got a lack of motivation for learning. And this is common to many students, actually. And for Jenny and other students like this, they're only going to participate when it's interesting, or if she feels like she's comfortable participating, if she feels like she's learning something, if she's making progress. But she's not willing to challenge herself as much as Tara and Chris. Tara and Chris are willing to make mistakes. They don't care. They want to learn. But Jenny feels worse and worse the more mistakes she makes. So I can relate to this. If you've ever learned another language, you probably fit into one of these categories, and I think I'm Jenny. Maybe you feel like you're forced into it. You really don't want to be there. And when I'm in a class trying to learn another language, I often feel self-conscious, and I feel stupid, and I feel like I can't do it, and frustrated. Sometimes I feel like crying. Sometimes I feel like I want to give up, and maybe Jenny feels the same way. So we can feel for Jenny, and in that way maybe learn how to interact with her in a different way from Tara and Chris, but in a way that will make her feel comfortable and still allow her to practice her English and learn. Let's take a look at our case study now. So, would you like some cheese? That's the name of our case study, and here is our lesson plan material. So we've got a little scene here. We've got some students, and they're having a bit of conversation. Before we teach this lesson, we're probably going to prepare and go through a few different steps so we can be effective at interacting with our students. So first of all, we have to figure out what is the target language, what do we need to teach, what's the point of this lesson. The target language for this slide is would you like, learning how to say would you like and answer with yes, yes please and no thanks. So pretty simple. We're thinking that we're going to present the target language by having the students do the role play based on the text. So maybe have them take turns reading what the students in the picture say. Get them to practice that language. And then we might see if they remember by doing a bit of exercises, maybe cover the key vocabulary or language and get the students to fill in the blanks. So maybe you might write on the board something like this, or maybe you'll cover it up in the lesson plan there. So maybe like this, and then get the students to go through and fill in the blanks. So we're practicing that language. And then to extend the material a little bit, maybe you'll ask them a few questions. You might say, where are they? Where are they? And there's really no wrong answers. They might say they're at home. Maybe they're at school, at a cafe, a restaurant. Just kind of brainstorm a little bit. And once you feel like they're comfortable with the language, then you're going to set a real scenario at a cafe or a restaurant or wherever they choose and do some role play. So this is a way for students like Tara and Chris to use the language in a practical way in a real life scenario. So let's see what that would look like. So we're going to role play. So the teacher might add a picture of a cafe to help the students imagine where they are. And then we're going to brainstorm some words and phrases and vocabulary so that the students have the tools they need to be able to role play. So we might ask the students, what do they have on the menu? And maybe some of these words that we're getting them to say here, things on the menu, are vocabulary words that you're bringing up again from the lesson. Or maybe they're words that they already know. Or maybe there's some words that you'll have to teach to them. But we're giving them the tools necessary to do their role play. So Tara and Chris say coffee, cakes, milk, water, sugar. If they are running out of ideas, you might give them some ideas, maybe some pictures. Soda, yes. What about water? Yes. And you're helping them come up with as many words as possible. Then we're going to try and get them to think of people that they would meet at a cafe or restaurant. So Tara and Chris say waiter and waitress, chef. Maybe you will help them along if they don't know these words. Use pictures if you need to. Oh, yes, chef. And you can teach them some new words too. Maybe you'll teach them customer or host. And now they have a few more words that they can use in their role play. So now we have some words that they can use when ordering. Now we have some people that they can play. What language should we use? So we might ask them, what would the host say? What would the waiter say? What does the chef say? And maybe get them to produce some language. You might, again, need to help them out. Like the host will say, hello, welcome, this way, please. And of course, we want to make sure we use our target language. Would you like? Make sure they remember what the customer is supposed to say. Yes, please. And no, thank you. We want to make sure that they're using their target language. And now we have enough information on the board for the students to be able to use what they've learned in a role play. And they shouldn't feel overwhelmed. They've got everything they need. They've got all the words. They've got the phrases. So now you can assign parts of the role play. So I might say, who is the cook? Chris, you're the cook. Okay, who is the customer? Who is the customer? Okay, Tara, you're the customer. And I am the waiter, for example. And you can begin the role play. So, action. So that's a fun way to interact with a student that wants to learn a little bit more, wants to be challenged a little bit, and wants to use what they've learned in the lesson in a practical way. But what do we do with a student like Jenny? So here's a tip. Make sure you build a scenario that Jenny feels safe to talk about. And then if she feels safe, then she's going to participate more. So perhaps talking about a cafe or a restaurant or a noodle bar is going to feel too difficult for Jenny. She doesn't know those words yet, and she feels intimidated with the whole scenario. Bring it back to her. Maybe instead of making a role play, let's just talk about her and ask her some questions. So we're just going to pretend we're in Jenny's home. That's a nice, safe scenario. She's probably talked about what she has in her home, what she has in her room before. So let's keep it nice and simple. Don't intimidate her with a big role play. So we want to make sure that she has some vocabulary to use. So we might say, it's snack time, Jenny. what snacks do you have in your house? And we think this is a little bit simpler, and we think that she'll be able to think of snacks. But maybe she doesn't know the word for snack, and maybe she doesn't know any words for snacks, even if she does know snacks. So you know what she does? She says nothing. And she's looking away at the screen. She can't even make eye contact. She's very uncomfortable. She's nervous, and she's not interacting. So we try again. We give her some options, and this is a good idea, giving multiple choice. Jenny, do you have any chips or sandwiches or hot dogs? So we're helping her along, giving her some vocabulary, but awkward silence. No, it could be that she's uncomfortable, which would probably be me. I'd be like, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? What do I say? Or it could be she just doesn't want to be there. It might be more like she just doesn't want to participate. She hates these lessons, and she just wants to get through the 25 minutes or 45 minutes and be gone. And if this has happened to you, I'm sure you would agree it's very frustrating. And as a teacher, you wonder, what am I supposed to do here? Because the interaction in the lesson is beyond your control. It's her issue a little bit, not your issue. You're trying to make it simple. You're giving her vocabulary. But it's still our issue. We still need to get the student to participate. So let's be dramatic. Let's make it a little bit more interesting and exciting. So get some props prepared. So we're talking about food. Let's pull out some of our, I have some mini cam objects here. This makes it more interesting. So hopefully to capture Jenny's attention. And who doesn't like talking about food, right? Also, if she is looking away or on her phone or just not paying attention to what's on the screen, you might have to bring her back. So use her name. Jenny, Jenny, where are you, Jenny? And try and make this as friendly as you can so that she doesn't feel scared or intimidated. And a bit of a call and response or rhymes in a melodic voice. Maybe you'll attract the student's attention. She should recognize her name, and she should recognize when you're calling it out. So she stops looking away and she looks at you. So you've drawn her in a little bit. And now you can do the talking a little bit because she doesn't like to talk. She doesn't like to interact. So make it fun. Make her want to participate. So you might say, look what I have. I like hamburgers. Do you like hamburgers? Or maybe we'll stick on the snack topic. I do have some chips. So I might say, look. I have chips. Do you want some? Yummy. Do you have chips in your house? Yes. Oh, I like chips. So I'm asking some simple questions. I'm seeming to be very interested in her chips in her house. And these are simple questions that can get her warmed up a little bit. They're low-level questions, but they're questions that she probably feels comfortable answering. Like, do you like? Do you have? And also, what is this? They're kind of very simple questions, and maybe she should be above level, but it gets her warmed up to it. So now that we have her attention again, then we might role play a little bit, but not making it intimidating. I might say, I have hamburger, hot dog, pizza. Would you like a hamburger? Yes? Yes, please. Here you are. Now I'm using the target language. I said, would you like? And when she answered yes, I made her say, yes, please. So let's try again. That is not a beverage. Okay. So I could say, Jenny, I have milk, soda, water. Would you like some water? No? No, thank you. That's right. No, thank you. Okay. Would you like some milk? Yes. Yes, please. Yes, please. So we're practicing our target language. It's a little different than with Taro and Chris. Taro and Chris wanted to be challenged. They wanted real-life scenarios. But Jenny needs a little bit of a different approach. Bring it down, make it a little bit easier. All right. Now, we talked a little bit about problems that can result in lack of interaction. We talked about things that are beyond our control. But what about other challenges like learning styles? So, for example, we have Taro, who is interested in the educational side of things. She probably likes reading. She probably likes doing activities. She likes grammar. But then we have Chris, and he wants to speak. He wants to interact. What can we do in a classroom if we've got different learning styles, for example? Would that prevent us from getting interaction? Well, no. We're still going to apply the same principles, except maybe we can have Taro write a menu down if she prefers to write. And then maybe we'll get Chris to do more of the talking. So we can use the student's style in the learning style in the role play to make them feel a little bit more comfortable in what they're doing. Now, when we talk about challenges, having mixed abilities or being in different levels in the same class, that shouldn't prevent our interaction as well. Yes, it is a bit of a challenge for the teacher, but you can always find something that will help the student feel comfortable and interact. So for one student, you might be asking more difficult questions. For a lower level student, you ask simpler questions. So really, we could have Taro, Chris, and Jenny all in the same classroom. You just need to see the comfort levels of each student. Now that is a definite challenge, but it will not prevent interaction if you deal with each student individually. Now, what if you have different personalities? Perhaps you have a smart student that wants to be challenged, but they're shy. And then you have another student that is very outgoing and overbearing, and maybe he talks over the other person. Now, this is a difficult challenge, but try to play with those personalities. And a role play is great for this because each person has to talk in turn. And a person can't do a role play on their own, even if they are more aggressive or outgoing. So you might want to try role plays in your classroom. If they are a little bit more shy, make sure that you give them time to answer. They're probably a little bit more thoughtful. They maybe don't say everything that comes into their mind. So be sure to give them a little bit of time. And if you do have to turn off the microphone if someone's speaking over them, that might be okay. But make sure that you only turn off the microphone after you've asked the student a few times to please wait for so-and-so to speak. And remember to always ask the student, address the student by their name first so everyone knows who's talking. Okay, so let's go back. Let's review. How do we set up an interactive classroom? Well, first we want to identify the target language. What are we teaching? So make sure that's the focus of your lesson. Then be sure to teach those phrases and words that is the purpose of your lesson. Teach the target language. So don't expect them to understand it all at first. This might just be a matter of reading. You might read if the student is a little bit low level so that they are familiar with the conversation. If it's an OUP and it's a conversation between Jenny and Andy, you can even use some little puppets so the student can see the difference between one person speaking and the other. Or sometimes I just use a boy and a girl. So when we're talking about conversation, I might use the boy to say, "Would you like some cheese?" "Yes, please." You can use different voices too. So this will help the student understand the different parts of the conversation. So you practice teaching the language. Then you practice. You see if they remember, or at least get them to try it out themselves. And you can do this by taking out some of the words and seeing if they remember. You can also do a little bit of a role play where maybe you say, "Would you like some cheese?" and see if they can respond back. If you'd like to extend, you might ask a few additional questions. For example, in this scenario, where does the conversation happen? Or you might ask, what do you like to eat? Or what do you see on the table? So just asking some additional questions that are outside of your target language, just to kind of get the student talking about the scenario and thinking in their mind a little bit more about the role play that might be coming later. And step number 5 is to set up the scenario. And we talked about this. We need to give the student the vocabulary and conversation necessary to be able to do a role play. So don't just throw them into it. Don't just say, "Okay, role play." That's very intimidating for any sort of student, especially our low-level students. They need to know what to say, who they are, and maybe some vocabulary to make it interesting. Remember, they just learned these new words, so they're going to need a little bit of a reminder. And it is a good idea to type those words on the board so they can look at them while they're doing their role play. Now, please bear in mind that not every student can do a role play, even though it is a great way to interact. Remember that we have low-level students, and it might be a little bit too hard for them to understand, especially when you're trying to explain what you're doing. They just may not get it. But you can, with low-level students, do role plays perhaps with a puppet. You're not setting the scene, but you can have them talk to the puppet or talk to another toy to just kind of get them away from the page and show them how what they're learning can be used in a real life scenario. Okay, so when we have a Jenny in class, please make sure to create an environment where she feels safe. And she may not want to be challenged too much. She wants to stay in her safe zone. She doesn't want to be corrected too much. She doesn't want to make doesn't want to make mistakes. That's hard on her ego. She already feels down on herself. So it's okay to dumb down material a little bit until a student feels comfortable, and then after that you can start extending the material. But if you find a student isn't saying anything, it might be that the questions are just too hard for them. So don't get frustrated. Just imagine you are a little scared girl and a strange teacher saying strange things to you, and even though you'd like to participate, you just feel that you can't. So a little bit of fellow feeling there will go a long way. All right, so that brings us to the end of our training. I hope that you learned a few tips on how to interact with different types of students. Now, we don't always know what motivates our students. It's hard to know if they're motivated or not motivated at all, but hopefully this will help your imagination a little bit when you have a certain type of student in the classroom. All right, so happy teaching, everyone, and maybe I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.